So thanks for joining us. We are going to spend the next hour, maybe a little bit less, focusing in on how you can support narrative writing in your K-3 classroom. If you got a pre-workshop email, you would have seen all the workshop, the handout, the Zoom link, and all the resources we're sharing today are available in our Padlet. And because you're here, you probably got all that information because that included the Zoom link. So thanks for being here, and we will get started. So here's what the Zoom link looks like. And because we're doing a 4-workshop series on writing through this month into December, what we're doing is we're adding resources to the same Padlet. So week after week, it will just grow with the newest information for the current workshop will be at the top. But if you scroll down, you'll see an archive. So by our final 4th session on December 7th, this will be quite a nice big collection of writing resources for you to check out and use and share. And so our objectives for this next hour are looking at mini lessons, activities, and routines, exploring scaffolded supports for writing to, with, and by our students with a focus in that narrative genre. And as much as we're teaching them those skills and strategies for what good writers do, what we're also wanting to do is really help build up our students' identities so they see themselves as writers. And part of that identity building is giving them a toolkit that's filled up with strategies and skills that they can call on. So writing behaviors they can use anytime they're approaching a writing activity across genres and across the curriculum. And when we look at the developmental stages of writing, you can see here there's that developmental continuum from emergent to early writers and then to transitional. This research on what writing looks like at these developmental stages is really important. It's a good check for us, depending on the kids in front of us and who we're teaching, to have realistic expectations and understandings of what they're able to do at each of these developmental levels. Because part of what we're wanting to do with that identity building is to let even our earliest, youngest writers have that sense of identity and belief that they are writers, even if what they're doing is putting some lines on paper and then telling us orally about it. Or if they're drawing a picture and they're able to write a label, the first letter of a word, if they drew a soccer ball and then put the letter B down, that's them writing to us about their soccer ball. So knowing what the developmental growth is through these stages is important for us to know what we're aiming for. And also it helps inform the supports and those demonstration and modeling that we're doing to let them know what the next steps are. So that just-in-time teaching to meet them where they're at and let them know what's next so that they have that clear path as well and an understanding of how they're developing as writers. As we do that explicit teaching and the modeling and the demonstration of what good writers think and what they do. And when we tie that to the writing performance standards from the Ministry of Education, in grade 1, narrative writing, they call that writing stories. And you'll see here, this is often them retelling stories that they've read, heard, or viewed. So it could be really common or popular Disney or Pixar movies. It might be a book that they get read for bedtime and they've heard it 100 times. And so they're familiar and the students have some familiarity that they can retell it with some confidence. That is a good foundational step for them getting exposure and repetition with story elements, plot, character, setting, all of those things that we're exposing them to and want them to know about. And then in grade 2, it evolves and gets a little bit more sophisticated and breaks out into these 2 different types of narrative writing. So the first, you'll see there's personal writing. They're writing connections, ideas, experiences, likes and dislikes. So very much tied to their own world. So family is a really nice, obvious, easy place to start. And extending that, it might be looking at children's lives around the world and how they're different. And then literary writing, again, that's story writing. We're still basing it on models and other texts that they're familiar with or stories they've heard or viewed. So it could be movies as well. And we're digging in more explicitly to story structure and character. And then they're practicing mimicking some of those mentor texts or some of those skilled authors that we've introduced them to in the classroom. Grade 3, we have those 2 categories again, personal and literary. Again, it builds up. And instead of it being more simple expressions of their experiences, likes and dislikes, it becomes more sophisticated, and that gradually they're able to create a variety of clear personal writing and a variety of imaginative writing. And so it says writing and representations there. That just means it's not always paragraphs. It's not always a story that's in their notebook or their journal. It could be, but it could be a poster. It could be a magazine cover. It could be a flyer. It could be any types of form and format to convey the meaning of what they're sharing with you. So it could be a reader's theater script, something like that. And then it could even tie in to other curricular areas such as socials and science. But it's following a story, so a narrative story arc. As we've shared in our other writing workshop that we did a couple of weeks ago, research shows how important it is for kids to be able to write on topics and write about things that matter to them. So that personal connection, the meaning and the investment and the passion and the excitement is critical at getting buy-in and helping to transform their writing into something that's good, into being something that could really wow us and wow them. So we'll get you to think here for a minute. What would you write about if we were giving you this writing assignment? So you're going to do some personal writing about your connection, your experience, an idea, or an opinion about something. So big samples here. You can choose from one of these, the best holiday you ever had, your favorite kind of whatever, movie, dessert, weather, art, activity. And then literary writing, if you were going to model a book that you love and write a new chapter or your own version of a favorite story, so a sequel to Paper Bag Princess, or a new adventure for Captain Underpants, or my jokey one here, don't let the pigeon join TikTok. Think about what something you would write about. We'll give you a minute timer for the music there. And really just, if you can give us 2 or 3 sentences about your topic. So it's not actually doing the writing, but just let us know what's something that you have a connection to that you would be happy to write about if we had more time together and you had the chance to do that writing. All right, so if you're just still writing in the chat box, you can wrap that up and hit enter. And Jen, I'll get you to, I see you were writing your own story there, Jen. I'll see if you can scroll and just share a couple of things that we've seen in the chat box. So there's some common themes. I saw that holidays a lot.
Yes, holidays and invention, meals. Yeah, lots of holidays, traditions, skydiving, pets. 10 good things about rain. That's a good one. Interesting. Yes, a new chapter for Magic Treehouse. Cool.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Lots of pets and writing from the point of view of from a tree. I like that. I think you mentioned that last week in our workshop, Lisa. Great.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, when we were in Kamloops. That's right. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
So as teachers, if we think about if we're wanting to model and demonstrate what good narrative writing looks like, choice is a really big part of it. And I can teach those skills and strategies and the styles and the traits and the elements of narrative writing to all of my students, but let them each write about what they would like to within that category. So if I said to you now, we're all going to write about ice skating, a story about ice skating in a winter wonderland, some of you might be pleased with that, and a lot of you might think, not that interested, I don't know that much about it. And so we'd lose some of that buy-in. So finding out what our students want to write about and what they know about and have connections to is a really great starting point for launching into really meaningful writing. And if you were with us last week, there are a few slides we're sharing again because we feel they're so important. So looking at that research on setting up our students for success. So having it be a predictable daily routine, the importance of helping them form that identity, and our students understanding that writing is a process of decision making and actions. So that's something that we need to be talking about. We need to share that with them explicitly when we're doing that writing to our students and writing with our students, that we're doing the think aloud and talking about how we make decisions when we're doing a piece of writing, for what to include, what wording to use, phrasing, rhythm, pace, voice, all of those things. And then also looking at the decisions we're making around editing and publishing. And we need to build up that momentum with our students, and we need them to see that they're growing and evolving as writers, even from week to week and month to month through the school year. And that sense of craft, and writing is a craft, and we can learn that craft from mentors, which are all of the books in our classroom and the read alouds that we do, the writing that we do as a teacher for writing to them, and also the ones we do collaboratively and interactively together. So that belief, if we can act like all of our children are already capable and competent writers, it's going to do so much to build their esteem and their identities. And if you believe you can do something, chances are you're going to feel a lot more likely to take a risk and try it out. So being mindful of the beliefs that we have about writing, knowing this is a research on what supports student success, and using all of that to help inform and be mindful of that as we make our lesson plans, our activities, fill in our literacy block, and provide that direct instruction and the opportunity and the time for our young writers to practice their craft. And as Ruth Cullum says, she's one of the amazing literacy experts with a focus on writing. She's got some fabulous books on writing, including the 6+1 traits, which is adapted and modified. I've used it with my intermediate students. I know a lot of secondary students that use that as well, because secondary students are still needing to reinforce and learn and practice what those traits are for good writing. But especially in primary, those demonstrations and discussions every day about writing, what comes next and why, and us making those explicit, strong, clear connections between reading and writing, and using mentor texts as models, as possibility for what our students can do. So the first thing we'll do, we'll cycle through writing to, with, and by students in this workshop. And so the first one is that explicit teaching, the direct instruction, and modeled writing. And so they get to see us as a competent, skilled writer and creating something live in real time in front of them, and talking through the decisions that we've made and what's important to consider. And this is happening over and over and over again. So we're revealing those actions, the thinking, decisions, and our mindset. And we're not just saying what we want to write, but we're showing them how we are going to write it. So it's not just a finished product, but they're involved and they are witnessing and exposed to us modeling the process of thinking, planning, brainstorming, writing. And then if you want to go through to editing and publishing, you can with some of the older students. But we want to also keep these short and peppy and engaging. So I know I used to do writing workshop with my students, and if I focused too much on proofreading with my grade 3s, I just lost them, and it kind of sucked all the joy out of a writing workshop. And so we shifted to trying just, do you remember COPS? Everybody doing COPS? Capitals, organization, punctuation, spelling. I learned to shift to just focus on one thing at a time. And it didn't overload my students and bog them down into too much. They still had to be aware of all of that, but we didn't need to do it all at once. So I'll get you to think about a small moment when something happened to you, maybe like him scoring a goal on his brother. I'll share my example here. This is my writing to you. And what do you think the writing skills or traits I'm highlighting here? So, and this would be if we were together, I would have talked about it. I would have written it out as we go, but obviously when we only have an hour and we're not all together. So a few weeks ago, I went to Vancouver Island for a holiday with some friends. First, we checked into the hotel, and then we found our room. After we unpacked our bags, oh, thanks, Ray. Yeah. First, then next, we opened the sliding door to let in some fresh ocean breeze. Then we put out some snacks and drinks and settled in for a visit. Suddenly, an adorable cat walked into a room and startled us. We were very surprised when it tried to eat some of our cheese platter. My friend picked it up and put it back outside. We were finally able to enjoy our delicious snacks in peace. So yeah, thank you very much for sharing. I was really trying to focus on the sequencing words. So a few weeks ago, setting the stage of when, and then first, then next, after, and then also some of those, excuse me, those juicy words or exciting vocabulary: suddenly, adorable, startled, surprised, delicious. So again, it's just focusing in on a couple of traits or skills and having that be what the focus is for today that everyone will focus on. So if you can reflect on a small moment, something that maybe happened to you or something that you did recently, and just do a bit of writing, 3 to 5 sentences about it in the chat box. So it could be like my story here. So you're actually doing the writing this time, but you've just got a minute, and we'll have a bunch of 60 plus stories in a minute when you all share. So bonus points for something silly like a cat eating your cheese, something funny, unexpected, unusual.
Oh my goodness. So grandson floating for the first time. Lovely. 7-month-old puppy. Oh, that looks interesting. Yes, discovered Brompton Oval. Okay, one morning walking my dog. So lots of cool pet stories here I'm seeing.
I'm seeing about cookies
Hiking.
too, in a gingerbread house, and hiking. I'm afraid to click on the chat box again because it'll lose my screen again. So I'm not going to touch it. So
no, for sure.
Thank
We
you.
got it. Yep. Lots of really fun stories. Oh, take these away, share them with your students. These are great.
Yes. I know whenever I did Pro D and then I would go back to school the next day and tell my kids that I had been at a workshop to learn about teaching and someone else had taught me, you could see it kind of blew their mind a little bit. It's like them thinking you have a life outside of the classroom too. But yeah, we can show you later on as well. But in the chat box at the bottom of it, kind of by where you type on the right-hand side, there's 3 dots. And if you click on that at the end, you can save a copy of the chat transcript to your computer. And then you could share some of these stories with your students and say, these teachers shared these stories about interesting things that had happened to them recently. Like, aren't these funny? Are they good? What are you noticing? So that might be something that you want to do. I think probably we'll save this and see if we can use some of these stories in future workshops as well. So thank you for sharing. So then moving on from writing to our students, that next, the gradual release of support and looking at writing with our students. The interactive writing piece is so important. Again, we're inviting them to join us. We're the skilled writer, but we're doing it together. It's collaborative, it's dynamic, it's happening right now, and it's giving them access to writing and a piece of writing, a finished piece of writing that's more sophisticated than they'd be able to do on their own. And it's showing them, it's giving them a goal, a stretch goal, something to aim for. So the student and the teacher compose the writing together. Interactive writing is viewed as a transitional tool to help them move forward. We can be intentional about what are ways we can make connections cross-curricular to socials, to science, to art, music, even to math. And we're drawing our students' attention to the details of the written language. So a little bit like I did where I had you notice what I was trying to do, what parts of my craft was I trying to highlight in my story about the cat trying to eat our charcuterie. And it was those transitional and the sequencing, as well as some juicy descriptive words. So I drew your attention to that. We could have a nice conversation about that in the classroom if we had a little bit more time. Okay,
so using the interactive writing techniques where we're working together, we're deciding what we want to write down, what's first, what's next, what are the important details. We can do this really easily with a shared activity or a shared experience, sorry. So in this case, we can help, we can recall a recent event. In this case, we're going to recall trick-or-treating and talk about all of the things that we noticed when we were trick-or-treating or all the experiences that we had. And then we can work with what that can look like as we put that into sequence. Okay, so in the chat box, write down some possible trick-or-treating activities that you can come up with in the next couple seconds here. What do you think? Something that you experienced, something that your students talked about? We have wearing a costume, wonderful. Collecting candy, being scared at someone's house, absolutely. A school parade, pumpkin carving, fireworks, having containers for your candy, walking up and down hills, meeting up with friends, haunted houses. Wonderful. So there's so many experiences that we could talk about together. And then we can do some great interactive writing as a group so that it becomes a group process and a group product. So how we can do this in the classroom is we can say the first sentence. We want to make sure everyone agrees with it. How does it flow? We can, of course, get our students to be part of that process by sharing the pen, depending on our students and what level they are and what their abilities are. We can have them input high frequency words. We can have them share sounds of beginning sounds, punctuation, all of those different things as we're working through the process. So we're not only involving them in the content, but the actual process of writing in a way that was that's really engaging for all of our students, and it's actually naturally differentiated as well. Okay, so here's a sample narrative of trick-or-treating. This year, Halloween was on Monday, so we had a class party before we went trick-or-treating. Everyone wore their costumes to school. Our teacher dressed up like the paper bag princess. On Halloween night, we went trick-or-treating with our families. Some houses had cool decorations. A few houses were scary. We all got lots and lots of candy. Mrs. Evans gave everyone full-size chocolate bars. Always the best. After we got home, we all counted our treats. If our parents don't let us eat it all at once, maybe we'll still have some Halloween candy left after winter break. So you can see how that is a powerful, this is our class experience of trick-or-treating. And they're all taking some part in that process and product. When we think about another way that we can teach writing in the classroom that we talk about a lot, and Lisa's already referenced this today, is using mentor text to inspire different kinds of writing, to gives ideas about what different writing is. So we used these mentor texts a lot in our classroom. This mentor text that I'm going to share with you next is a little bit more unique, because I think most of we would use this in a way to inspire our students so that they get an idea that writing isn't about perfect spelling. It's not about really neat printing. It's about getting ideas down, that risk-taking that Lisa was talking about, and not striving for perfection. That is one of the hugest things that I see in our classrooms, is that shutdown of writing because it doesn't necessarily look perfect. So I hope you enjoy this story, and we will talk a little bit more about it after. What's your story? What was writing like for you? How did you experience writing? Was there anything that was difficult or that you loved? Think about your identity as a writer. And I will invite you to really have a little bit of time to think about that, because I think that that's an important message from the book that we just listened to about Abdul. Was he needed that mentor to describe his writing process, and maybe we can be that for our students as well. So can you choose one or two of the above questions to reflect on and share a few sentences in the chat box? Yeah, so different pencil grips and different writing tools can make writing easier for students that have problems with that. it's great, to share that writing comes easily, and then you can talk more about that with your students, like what happens when to make that process easy, and that mistakes are okay. Oh yeah, Lauria, for sure. Frozen and worrying about making mistakes. That was me as well. So thank you. Spelling can hold some students back. And then, reading other people's books. There's lots of really wonderful things in the chat box that you can please take away and share and think about and reflect. I think it's very, very important for us to share our writing identity with our students as well, for sure. Okay, so what we know about writing development is that we need that instruction that Lisa has talked very in depth about throughout our writing sessions that we've been doing. So the very direct instruction that involves that modeling, that's very important. Critical feedback, and critical not meaning negative, but meaning explicit and timely. So what is going to move our students forward? What's going to nudge them? And a phrase that I just absolutely love to use with students is, I think you're ready for. Rather than telling them you need to do this or you need to change this, it's an invitation. I think you are ready for. And it's a different way to phrase things that builds our students up for, I am ready for this. And then of course, as Lisa mentioned as well, the topics that they care about, giving our students lots of freedom to write about things that they want to be writing about, and not everyone wants to be writing about ice skating. So if children aren't trying to write, they aren't learning to write.